Hey, welcome back to Egg Meets Sperm. I'm your host, Dr. Omatma, and today you are going to hear a special interview that I did on the podcast called Embracing Flow with Heather. I am sharing it with you guys. I'm sharing excerpts from this podcast with you guys because I thought it was a really insightful set of questions and I shared some really good information. And a lot of people want to hear these conversations. So I'm giving you some excerpts, and there is a link in the bio to get to the actual podcast if you want to hear it in its entirety. So I do hope that you will head over and listen to the entire episode. And if you're on the go, you just need something quick, today is it. You're going to get some excerpts of some of the most insightful things that I shared on this interview with Heather. I'll see you in there. Bye. Well, I started cycling late at the time, which I got my first period like just before I turned 15. And like, I felt like my friends already had their periods by then, but no one talked about it. Like literally never. And like my mom certainly didn't talk to me about it. And I had seen in her bathroom like these fat things, the pads, right? Like they were so thick and heavy and gross. And that's what I used for so many years. Like it's crazy to think about it now, but oh my God, like how little I knew. My first conversation with women around menstrual cycles wasn't till I was like way in my late 20s. And I remember a conversation with one of some of my girlfriends, and they were talking about menstrual cups. And I was like, there's no way. I just can't imagine that I'm going to stick a cup up there. I barely know how to wear tampons, you know? And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I always use pads because that's what my mom did. And she never talked to me about tampons. I knew they existed, but they felt overwhelming. So I think for a lot of my life, periods have been kind of a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of we don't talk about this. And I remember I just have so many memories. Like my grandmother implemented, like there's a cultural thing that Indians do, which is women are not allowed in the kitchen or in a temple when you're bleeding, right? And the idea is that you're dirty, quote unquote. Okay. So I grew up with this shame and ick feeling around periods. And it's kind of hilarious that I do fertility now because I only talk about periods. All freaking day I talk about periods. So it's like such a drastic change from where I started out and what I was brought up with. But I think that's partly why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? I have been there where people don't talk and it's shameful. And of course, like fertility has this whole shame aspect to it. So I see a lot of like overlaps in how my early childhood life set the template for what I think we can break through now. I think it started out in a well-meaning place, right? Mm-hmm. Staying out of the kitchen meant someone else was serving you, right? If you were allowed in the kitchen, like if that was the boundary, then you were somehow getting fed that had nothing to do with you actually going and cooking your food. So I think it started out from this place of you're going to be taken care of. What it turned into over generations is like the decrepit version of that, which was, oh no, you're dirty, stay out there. Yeah. But I think, as I've grown older and I've learned about red tents and like culturally, there was this aspect of women go and bleed and they're going to be taken care of and supported by the community who's not bleeding right now. But as things evolved and we stopped living in communities and we no longer do those things and we're expected to live in these insular homes, but we still carry those traditions over. Well, those traditions don't convert if you don't live in a community that can serve you. Oh, yeah, So FABNE stands for Fellow of the American Board of Naturopathic Endocrinology, which, as you said, is a really fancy way of saying I'm a hormone expert done naturally. What's unique about this certification is that there's only 20 of us in the country that hold it right now. And it's kind of it takes a while to get the certification, but I helped write the exam for that certification. So I'm kind of like one of the OGs in naturopathic endocrinology, and we help create like a curriculum. And how do we expect someone who is a naturopathic endocrinologist, like you are an expert in hormones? That doesn't mean you know one little aspect of hormones. You have to know like the breadth of all of endocrinology to be able to get the certification. And then, of course, I've kind of focused all of my clinical and career on fertility, which is such a narrow aspect of even that, right? Endocrinology is this huge thing. And then the focus on fertility is this tiny, tiny, tiny little thing within that. So yeah, there's definitely like such a breadth of knowledge there. And there are a lot of naturopathic doctors that are amazing, but they're not necessarily hormone experts. So this is a little bit of a differentiator. If having the hormone expertise is something that you need, then you want to find a naturopathic endocrinologist or someone that has this FABNE title. And then fertility has changed a lot. I've been doing this for 15 years, 19 years as a naturopathic doctor and 15 years specialized. So gosh, I feel like when I started, there were like 4 naturopathic doctors that said they did fertility. There was very little like research, but also like awareness around what natural medicine is for fertility specifically, and at which point people were seeking us out has kind of changed. Like, I think there are more people now that are like, I don't want to do IVF. What if I don't want to do IVF at all? Versus back then, it was like, oh, I've already done 4 or 5 cycles. Now, can you help me? So that's shifting a little bit, but I still think that the overwhelming majority is still IVF focused, or I'm going to take supplements myself and then I'm going to do IVF, which is very, very interesting to me. It's all just like fun to watch, you know? There's actually another thing that's also happening that I want to speak to, which is the DIY. I'm going to Google the crap out of fertility and do all the things, right? And AI is my doctor. Like that's happening, that trend is happening. So I want to speak to that versus naturopathic endocrinology versus the conventional like IUI to IVF approach. So let's start there. The conventional approach is beautiful. It's actually like I've been in the room when IVF is happening and they're doing the implantation and like having spiritual experiences while that's happening. It was like really trippy. At the core of it, it is overriding what the body is naturally doing in order to control it to do what we want it to do. Right. And again, I don't want to make it sound like it's negative. I think there are lots of amazing things about it. And IVF, like, it is one of the most incredible sciences that has emerged in the last 25 years. And we need it, right? Like, we're going to need it more and more. So IVF isn't going anywhere. I think it's a beautiful technology. The problem is that there is a lot of miseducation around what IVF can do for you. I'll give you a quick example. I talked to, and that this is going to be perfect to also show the differences. So I talked to this couple last week, and we did a deep dive review of all of their labs. So they have collected like so much information in the last month and a half that it was designed to help them discover what is happening under the surface? Why are they getting pregnant and not staying pregnant? So the goal of all of those lab tests that they got was, how do we figure out why? And that's the question that naturopathic medicine, naturopathic endocrinology can help solve. Because in our book or our mind, it's not where IVF or the conventional world sort of says fertility. Oh, we're talking about FSH, LH, beta HCG, progesterone, estrogen. Those are the hormones we're going to manipulate. And those are the hormones that, as we manipulate them, you're going to get pregnant. In the naturopathic world, we go a layer deeper. We know that the entire endocrine system is interconnected. It's connected to the psychoneuroimmunology aspect. So what's happening in our brains and our minds and our immune systems is impacting endocrinology, our hormones. What's happening in our gut is also impacting our hormones. And then what's happening in our endocrine system in and of itself is interrelated. So what's happening in your brain and your adrenals and your thyroid is all impacting your fertility hormones. So there are layers upon layers of these interconnections, and your estrogen being elevated can have 8 different root causes. It could be your estrogen's not detoxing, your liver's clogged, your gut doesn't have the right microbes, it's affecting your vaginal microbiome. There's so many of these nuanced things that if you're not seeing the whole picture, you are missing. So I want to bring the DIY approach in just for a second, which is here, someone looks up and says, how do I lower my estrogen? It's too high. So she Googles, how do I lower estrogen? And AI will do a really fantastic job pulling all of the internet and the web and all of that and give you a list of supplements that are going to help you lower your estrogen. The problem is that if your estrogen is high because of reason 6 and not 2, you would have a very different approach to how a naturopathic endocrinologist would deal with this issue in front of them. So now you have people that are doing this DIY stuff without fully understanding what the impacts are going to be. And even as a naturopathic doctor, I'm like, if we think about this stuff very deeply and we say, hey, if we give you this herb, like we were just talking about someone who we were going to give rosemary to, and we're reviewing it as a team, and we said, well, if we give her rosemary for her immune system, she had an autoimmune thing, and if we give her that, but we also know that rosemary decreases conversion from this estrogen to this other estrogen, are we going to create more issues? So that's the level of detail that we have to think about every supplement. And then you see people come in with garbage bags full of supplements, and you're like, oh my God, right? Like in my brain, I'm sitting there, holy shit, the interactions that are happening here. So it's really, really, really important to understand that supplements are awesome also. But if you're taking the wrong things, and if you haven't done this level of analysis to get to the answer, then you're working on the superficial. And sometimes that could work. The problem is too many times it throws it more out of whack. And then the conclusion is either the supplements are garbage, or the IVF doctor says, oh yeah, that's just trash. There's no research on that. You did the wrong thing. Just do IVF. And it's, well, no, the problem isn't the supplement. The problem is that it was taken by the wrong person who didn't know how to analyze everything. All that to say that those are the approaches that are really popular in the fertility world. And Where we come in is really that deep level analysis. So this couple, going back to the woman that I was talking to like last week, they found out just before that meeting with me that they were going to get two free IVF cycles through her insurance. So I'm like, cool, that's awesome. It's great to have those, right? But now she's comparing what we offer to IVF, which is not comparing apples to apples. And they're going to opt to do the IVF cycles. And I was like, okay, that's your choice. I have told you what's happening under the surface. And she has 6 or 7 things that are under the surface. Mind you, she's never had struggles getting pregnant. She's had 3 pregnancy losses. Nothing that IVF is doing. There's one thing that IVF does, which is be able to monitor for chromosomal anomalies that can support healthy pregnancy. But if you don't have chromosomal anomalies, and that's not the reason you're not staying pregnant, there's nothing that IVF is doing that is going to help her stay pregnant. So I wish her the best. And I was like, I'm totally like, I support you to do whatever you feel like is best for you. But I want you to realize that these root causes are not going away without you dealing with them. So it's like IVF is awesome. And if you have these root things happening under the surface where your body is not functioning optimally, then it's going to be a waste, unfortunately, of a lot of time and a lot of money to go through these cycles, the impact that has on your body, only to come out on the other side feeling like, what the hell? Why did this work? This was supposed to be the magic bullet. And to that, your doctor saying, sorry, it's your age. And that to me is the heartbreak. Is damn, you knew that there were underlying issues. You didn't deal with them. Then you went to IVF. And now you're being told by your doctor that, oh, it's your age. And that it takes away any layer of control, of the ability to do something about it. And instead you're stuck with, oh my God, I'm doomed. This will never work. We never were taught the basics, and we're not taught what even a optimal period should feel like, right? It's so normalized to have pain, to have symptoms. I've heard women who have 10 out of 10 pain, they're curled up in bed for 2 days, and they're told by their doctor that they don't need a workup for endometriosis. They don't need anything. They're fine, and they should try and get pregnant. And I'm like, there is no way this woman has 10 out of 10 pain. I don't care what your pain scale is. 10 out of 10 is way too high. And it's mind-boggling to me. And she doesn't have endometriosis because there's no pain with intercourse. And to me, I'm thinking like, yeah, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
You can have pain with your menstrual cycle. You can have pain with sex. You can have pain with poop. Like, I don't care what level of pain. When it's abnormal, you need to be screened for endometriosis. So it's mind-boggling how many women are sitting with levels of symptoms that are normalized to them as, oh, that's just part of being a woman. No, sorry.
No.
We're no longer doing that. For those people that are not trying to get pregnant, toxins are relevant. I said this on a interview last week. Toxins, most reproductive toxins are also carcinogens. So I don't care if you're trying to get pregnant or not. Everybody needs to be paying attention to the fact that what reproductive medicine is coming up with, hey, this affects your reproductive system, it almost always is a carcinogen. So pay attention, folks. And like, this is not just about getting pregnant and having babies. No. This is really like our reproductive health is the core analysis of our overall health. It's your report card, quote unquote,
Mhm.
of what's happening with your health over the course of a month. So only we as women have this ability. Like men don't get this feedback. So take the feedback. So toxins. There are so many toxins, but let's go to the big ones and give like an overview of how toxins affect our reproductive system. So toxins can affect the thyroid. Thyroid is a really big gland that regulates so much of what's happening in your body, and it's very fragile to the outer world. So you have toxins come in, they're going to affect the thyroid. That's a big one. The liver, because the liver detoxes all of your toxins out. If it has too many toxins to deal with, it can't do its job very well. It gets burdened. It's like overworked, underpaid most of the time.
Yep.
And then you have your gut, which is another major way that your outer world stays out of your inner world. So there are all kinds of barriers in our gut that keep toxins in where they can be pooped out. But if that barrier is impacted, if the microbes in your gut are dead or imbalanced, they're going to allow through toxins that should not cross the gut barrier. So then you have toxins going in through the gut. And then the last that we don't often think about is our vaginas. Like, that's another place that toxins can actually enter. And not just in the form of a penis, but
Yep.
also tampons. Like,
Mhm.
tampons are probably the biggest way that toxins are getting into our, like, the very thin protective layer that we have in our vaginas. So it's so important to understand that toxins can come from all of these different things, but they are going to impact our reproductive system through all of these pathways. And then the big ones that I pay attention to, so vaginally, glyphosate is the biggest toxin. Gut will also absorb glyphosate. So non-organic food or non-organic tampons, and even tampons that say organic on the cover, there's a whole like 60% of our tampon is made of organic cotton, but then the other is not. Like, what's happening? Or 2% is organic. There's a lot of misleading information on the front of a box of
Mhm.
tampons, specifically. Most cotton plants are grown with pesticides, unfortunately. And cotton is what we want and need in a tampon because it's absorbable. So most of the time they're using cotton that's not organic. If they're using organic cotton, you want to think about, is that cotton field right next to the one that uses non-organic, and who's screening this stuff? So I'm like convinced that we just need to stop with the tampons. Like, just move to a menstrual cup, say goodbye. Well, the trash that it creates in the environment is just not worth it. So menstrual cups or reusable pads or tampon, reusable underwear, that kind of thing. Anything that is reusable and is not continuing to increase exposure locally to a very frail mucous membrane that protects you. The other, glyphosate also in food, non-organic food, is going to impair the microbiome in your gut, which then causes that barrier to be weakened and you have more toxins floating in. So those are going to be the big ones. Other than that, we have BPA or bisphenol compounds, BPA, BPF, BPS, and then phthalates, which are present in fragrances. And those are the two big, like, endocrine mimickers. So they mimic hormones that then confuse the body about wait, is this my hormone? Doesn't know what to do with it. And some of them are bioactive, which means they will bind to the same receptors that your actual hormone would bind to and have effects that that hormone would create, which is extremely problematic. If you have a plastic compound, BPA, that binds to an estrogen receptor, it activates the system as if there's estrogen in the system. If you don't have estrogen, so like we can take just one example, estrogen in the reproductive system is activating the release of luteinizing hormone in the brain to cause ovulation to happen. So your eggs, as they develop, are increasingly producing estradiol. That estrogen is going to the brain and saying, hey, time to switch from FSH to LH to make ovulation happen. The problem with that is BPA comes in and binds to all those estrogen receptors in the brain. Then the brain is, oh, there's enough estrogen. And you could potentially ovulate too early. You would probably have not great quality eggs when that ovulation happens. And if you don't have great quality eggs, I'm sorry, pregnancy ain't happening. You really have to think about, yes, the toxins are a problem in and of themselves. But when you're talking about fertility, what is the impact that that toxin is now going to have on the way my hormones are fluctuating through the month and the signals and the compounds that are being created off of that, that now are going to impact whether or not I can get pregnant. And additionally, can I stay pregnant? So those are all the things. A BPA from plastics, all the plastics, and even the paper receipts have BPA in the ink. So getting rid of those, switching to glass or stainless steel containers, glass bottles, etc., things like that. You guys have all heard this before, I'm sure. And then really focusing on going fragrance free is a really good use of your time, because fragrances or perfume, quote unquote, is on a lot of products. It's in cleaning products. It's in the candles you're burning. It's in your makeup. It's in your hair products. It's everywhere. And if you can lower the number of fragrances that are going into your body, you're going to support your hormonal system to function better. So getting rid of the perfumes is good. And then we didn't talk about skin, but we're absorbing so many toxins right through our skin. So the stuff that we put on our skin is going to be extremely important. And if we can limit the exposure of how many toxins go on our faces before we get on Zooms, they're going to help our hormones. So those are, I would say those, if we can start doing the big things, you can certainly do more, but I think that those cover the big ones that I think of when I think of the impact that we have on our fertility. And it's the same for men. So the same toxins, glyphosate, obviously they don't have vaginas. They don't have to worry about the local exposure, but they do need to worry about phthalates, BPA, BPS. And I always say this example because men love, I don't know what it is. They love they love their car to smell great, right? And they love it to be clean. And so many of those car cleaners are like super toxic. And then you like put on an air freshener thing that is going to be all the phthalates going into your car, and you're in this like very contained environment driving for however long you drive every day. You're getting a lot of exposure. So they may not use makeup, but they're using all of these products that are then going to affect their fertility in a big way. Testosterone converts to estrogen in the male body, in the female body also. are so the end product is estrogen. For men, if you have estrogen going up, your testosterone may be not going up, but your estrogen is going up through the exposure of these toxins. That estrogen is the feedback loop to the brain to stop the production of testosterone. What? Like, we have a testosterone epidemic where so many men are deficient in testosterone and they're being pumped full of testosterone with injections, with patches, with whatever. Yet no one is talking about the fact that if you are exposing your body to estrogen, your brain is getting the message to shut off production of testosterone. Birth control is a whole thing we could do.
Yeah.
But it's essentially, if you think of most doctors are thinking about the reproductive hormones as isolated in the pelvis. The problem is that we're not accounting for the brain hormones that are interconnected to the reproductive hormones. So you can come with birth control, and it's basically like a disconnect between your brain and your ovaries. And you keep that disconnection for long enough, and then you get off of it and you're like, great, get me pregnant. And that's not going to work because there's no connection between the brain and ovaries. They've been disconnected for so long. And now we're like, hey, you guys start working again, start talking to each other again and make a baby.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. I came into it because of fertility, right? I've been observing hormones and what's happening in people's cycles. And it's become like a very popular thing now. So yes, I've heard you talk about it on your podcast. And what's the core of it is that our hormones are an indicator of where we are in life, in that phase of our cycle. And what I think of as womb wisdom is being in touch and aware of that environment is really helpful in your fertility or fertility awareness if you're holding off till later in life. But B, like using that energy in your business and in your work life is like a game changer. So the way I think about it is winter, spring, summer, fall. Like seasons are really easy to think about. And your winter is going to be menstrual phase. It's the phase that you're actively bleeding. That phase goes into spring as you get out of that phase, but the rest of your follicular phase is spring. Winter is like a really good time to go inward. It's a good time to meditate. It's a good time to be with yourself. And in business, I also think of it as be with your business. So a lot of reflection on what are the numbers? What is it telling me? What do I need to cut down? What do I need to stop committing to? Because I tend to be very overcommit. What do I need to cut out? That's happening in my menstrual phase. Then in the spring, your hormones, your estrogen is actually starting to go up. Estrogen is a really powerful hormone. I call it the superwoman hormone because as that estrogen starts surging, and estrogen made out to be the bad guy. I'm like, I don't know about you, but I love estrogen. Thank you, body, for having estrogen because that's my get shit done phase, right? Like I am so productive and so on top of things. And to add to it, when you get towards that like just before ovulation, that estrogen is almost at its peak. It's also a really good connection hormone. So I try to plan all of my podcast interviews and, I need to film. I'll be on camera for a few hours. Like all of that is happening in my follicular phase or in spring. And then summer is the short phase of actual ovulation. So the few days before, the few days after the actual ovulation event is going to be summer. And summer is, again, taking advantage of all of the estrogen, taking advantage of luteinizing hormone. You're feeling juicy. It's so good. And I'm a summer baby, so I love summer. It's my favorite. And it's also my favorite hormonally. So I capitalize on summer all day long. And then we're in fall. And fall is gonna be the time to harvest. And this is often what we don't do very well. And it's reflected in the the prevalence of luteal phase defects. It's reflected in our society because we don't value that season, right? In agriculture, it's very valued. There's fall harvests and festivals, and there's a lot happening because that season is to celebrate your wins. It's to acknowledge everything that you've done in the seasons leading up to that. And it's a really good time to take your lessons, take in what you've learned, integrate, and just see what still fits, what doesn't fit, what do I need to throw away, what do I need to keep. I have a practice called compost or cauldron, which is compost is like all the stuff that you're letting go of, and cauldron is all the stuff that you're feeding and turning into a soup. So like that little like witchy brew, put all that shit in there. Put all the good stuff in there. So that practice I do in my luteal phase as a way to just have some reflection and really figure out what seeds I'm going to plant in the winter of the following or season. So that's the gist of it. That's how I'm using it, and I've seen a lot of, like, at least in my life, I started applying it about 3 years ago, and that was simultaneously, like, I had started a podcast, I was doing my teaching, and still, like, seeing clients full on. And I was like, "Oh my god, this is a lot. Like, what is happening? I feel so busy all the time." And I had to find a way to organize my life so that I didn't burn out. And I was like, "Wait a second. Like, I have all this stuff for fertility. Like, why don't I apply it all?" And, like, within a few months, I was like, "Oh my god, I have more energy. Oh, I'm, like, doing more, but it doesn't feel like I'm doing more. I've just made it more streamlined. It's more efficient." And and then I started bringing it into my startup, and my co-founder is a man who, like, is very comfortable talking about periods and all of that, of course. So I was like, "Hey, so we're gonna adopt this thing in our practice that you don't bother me to create content on different phases of my cycle, or you just expect that it's only gonna get done in this one phase." And he was like, "Okay, I'm willing to try it." And we started implementing it in the startup, and we were like, "Oh, this is cool." So lately I've expanded, like, mostly I would talk about it with women entrepreneurs, but I'm starting to find that men entrepreneurs or co-entrepreneurs can help support and align to that pattern and actually benefit from it, right? We have phases in our business where we're like super in go mode, and then we have the chill out mode, and we actually are doing the reflection pieces. So we've integrated so much of that into how we are doing the business. And I have some entrepreneurial friends who are men that are starting to apply it on a moon cycle. So if they don't have a co-leader that's a woman, then just sync to the moon. Do this with the moon. So they're starting to apply it and see, and it's still like early phases, but I'm trying to coach them to see, like, how does this affect your 8-figure business if you are able to, like, think and have your meetings based on where you are in the moon cycle. and it's really cool to watch. They're benefiting from something that is traditionally, like, women keep to themselves, and I think that there's a wisdom in it for all of us. It's not just for the women. So, the book is on Amazon, Fertility Secrets: What Your Doctor Didn't Tell You About Baby Making. I do have a podcast, it's called Egg Meets Sperm. You can find it on your favorite podcast platform. And and we have a YouTube channel also, same, Egg Meets Sperm, if you in case you like to watch instead of listen. I'm one of those people, like, I'll focus better if I can see someone. So, I like to watch my podcast. And then we have Instagram, which is usually where people will connect and find me and get loads and loads and loads of information, which is at Holistic Fertility Doctor. When we are when we feel safe enough in our bodies to create new life, we are safe enough to live life fully. And so the core of my message is that as we create safety, and safety is in the form of the environment, the toxins that we're exposed to, like, how do I limit that exposure? That's a level of safety. Safety in our relationships, safety in our endocrine system and how that interacts with our metabolic system and our immune system. Like, we're creating safety on all of these layers. And when we get to that point where our body is, like, safe enough to have a child, we are safe enough to live and fully embrace the power that we have within us.